Ready to go? Great. Kia ora koutou. Welcome everyone to this hearing of submissions in relation to our smoke-free and gambling policies and the reviews of those. So we've got 8 presenters lined up for the night, 9 presenters lined up for the evening, and we're going to keep pretty tight to schedule so that we can be finished on time before 6, because there are many of us that have got other things on this evening. So what we're going to be doing is opening the opportunity for presenters and our submitters to present for 5 minutes each, and then there'll be an opportunity for us to ask any questions that we may have in regards to that. But I'll try and keep those pretty close to time frames so that we can get through this as quickly as possible. Welcome to those that are online. Some of our councillors are online for this session. And we also have our first submitter is online, so welcome. Peti, nice to see you. If you can unmute yourself, you'll be welcome to start your presentation. Thank you.
Can you all see my screen?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Fantastic. Mai ngā kahui mo ngā whakahi o Tararua, e rere atu ki wahori pōkau ana te moana o Rakawa. Tū mai rā te motu rongonui o Kapiti, kei te riu o Otaki, ko tainui te waka, ko te roa te tangata, te hei wā, Māori ora. A tina tātou, nei rā ngā mihi mai o hā kia koutou, kia koe te mea Janet, tina koe, tina hoki koe Liz, koutou katoa. He uri ahau o Ngāti Toa, Ngāti Raukawa, me te atiawa, I tipu ake au I Otaki. So kia ora, my name is Peti, I'm a descendant of the Art Confederation. I was raised in Otaki, where my parents still reside. So thank you for the opportunity to present today on behalf of the Tainui Marae Committee and the Hapu of Ngāti Kapu I Otaki. I do have to declare conflict of interest in that I am a Pouhiwa Health Promoter for the Problem Gambling Foundation of New Zealand, based in Kirikiriroa in Waikato, Hamilton. So as we are a national organisation, I am enabled as a community activator to mahi across and with the community I was raised in. So therefore, I'm representing, the voices of our Otaki community as the iwi and hapu member of the whenua. So on behalf of the Tainui Marae Committee and Ngāti Kapu endorses policy option 3, that is a sinking lid, which proposes no further consents be issued for additional Class 4 pokies venues and TAB venues, but also, and we also endorse the strengthening of the harm reduction approach of a sinking lid policy with no relocations and no club mergers throughout the Kapiti region. This is the gold standard approach because it provides for better protection for those at risk of experiencing harm from gambling, particularly tangata whenua. So hopefully you've all read the submission, but just to recap that we commend the Kapiti Coast District Council for their gambling policy statement of proposal 2023. And we endorse the council's initiative to align to the wider district council's commitment to reducing harm with a sinking lid, rejecting relocations and mergers. And we'd also like to endorse the PGF Group's submission to reduce gambling harm across the nation. So just being mindful that we've only got a couple of more minutes before questions, just to really emphasise that pokies are designed to be addictive, and generally they are disproportionately placed in areas with high to medium social and economic deprivation, and so Otaki would be an example of that with the index at 9, with 10 being the highest. But also to emphasise that while the effects of pokies are obscuring the individual's need to gamble, the real question is, how has the system contributed to these effects? And so, what are the solutions to reverse the effects for all communities? And so that's why your role is really important in strengthening that harm reduction across the Kapiti region. And so I was going to go into some of the figures, but really what's worked well with Otaki as an example across the region is having that sinking lid with no mergers and no relocations, because it's meant that there has been a significant drop in the number with I think it was the Telegraph Hotel moved away from having pokies in their venues. So that's just been a real strength in terms of protecting our tamariki and mokopuna from pokies being normalised in the environments that they're growing up in. So that's a real strength to the Kapiti Coast Council's approach to minimising gambling harm. And if we could see that, consistently across the other communities, being Waikanai, Parapiraumu, and Paikakariki. So that's the benefit of having that sinking lid in place. Kia ora, questions?
Kia ora, Pete. Thank you so much for that presentation, and you were bang on time. The bell had just rung as you finished, so well done, congratulations. We've got a couple of questions, some lights on around here, so I'll hand over to the first of our councillors with a question, which is Councillor Pravanov.
Thank you, Hetty, for giving your presentation today and your submission today. So obviously we have a range of submissions today, and so I'm just wondering if you could make some comment around the sinking lid policy versus the money that comes into the Otaki community from gambling, about the pros and cons and the balance of that, please.
I'll try my best. Look, what we do know is that the DIA don't require the pokie industry to determine, to be accountable for measuring, kaupapa Māori applicants when they apply to the community funding grant. So there's actually no way to measure how much money goes back to kaupapa Māori, even though we know that the money is being taken away from our Māori communities. So there's actually, I would guess, maybe 1% of, that 3 million that was taken, and that's just a very general estimation, just medium, so it's a really we don't know. It's very minimal. It's not enough. It's inequitable. It's an inequitable return.
Thank you very much for your answer. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Councillor Pravanov. Councillor Coe.
Hi, Petty. Lovely to see you again. Hey, one of the issues even with the sinking lid policy is that it takes a long time to work through. So this might be a little bit outside what we're talking about today, but I'm really interested in your thoughts on what can be done in addition to that sinking lid policy to remedy the situation, particularly in Otaki. And I'm presuming that your foundation is actively doing things in that area. Perhaps you could talk a little bit about what you're doing to help that situation. Thank you.
Thank you. Kia ora. So our services are really stretched. So in terms of, so the Problem Gambling Foundation is funded by the gambling levy, and we've got a health promoter that's based in Wellington. The closest kaupapa Māori providers is in Porirua and then also in Palmerston North. So Otaki is in that, in that zone on the boundary. So in terms of minimising gambling harm for Otaki, I've been able to, support Tainu Marae with seeking funding from from the Safer Gambling Aotearoa Community Fund, where an event was held, and we've had a couple of projects that we've done there, and we've held focus groups with whānau gamblers, with gamblers and whānau that are affected by gambling. So we've done a couple of innovative things in trying to denormalise gambling for our Māori communities, and it's just astounding how pokies is impacting on the lives of our communities, especially just having that access on every corner, and the lights, having the lights that go up, but actually outside the pub is actually quite triggering for poker gamblers that are trying to stay away. So it's there needs to be more done on the ground level, and in the community activation space, to really draw awareness to these machines are designed to be addictive. And getting that messaging really, really clear to, give people that, more education around it, around the harm.
So are you saying that Otaki kind of falls between the cracks a wee bit in terms of where the boundaries lie? Yeah.
Specifically to address gambling as a addiction. Yes, it is. There are services there in Otaki, so slowly working to collaborate more with them. But they're, we're all stretched in terms of all the raft of inequities that are occurring, throughout our communities, and so gambling is just another issue for us to have to try and address. So there's just more work to be done, and so having that sinking lid in place does add that extra protection, because it's a less trigger for our people as they're driving through town. It only takes 5 minutes to get from the beach to the railway, so
Okay, thank you.
Kia ora, Peti. Councillor Spires has a question as well.
Thank you. Kia ora. Just wondering, you're mentioning clubs. I'm wondering what kind of clubs. Are you talking sporting clubs, chartered clubs, or across the board, not mergering?
So generally, some, I think, clubs are able to merge in some regions. I might have to ask our. I think Christy is there from the foundation. She'll be able to answer that when it's her turn. But what we don't want is for venues to hold more than 18 machines. So sort of bringing together, because then it becomes a mini casino. The more machines you have activated in a venue, the more exciting it becomes, and it just generates more harm. So just being mindful that restricting access is really important in terms of minimising the harm.
Thank you.
Fantastic. And one last question from Councillor Wilson. Yes.
Kia ora. Hey, just an observation, by the way. The Tally Hotel does have poker machines. They transferred the license from across the road, but the just in terms of the gambling, the Otaki Maori Racing Club is quite a popular venue and seems to be seen generally as a good resource for the town. So, are there any issues around that for you?
Well, my personal perspective really comes down to gambling being another form of assimilation, or rather colonization. And so that's how, gambling's become quite popular amongst our Māori whānau, and how it's become quite normalised. So while, the activity of attending horse races and how they're publicised into whānau days and family days, and the relationship and the history that was formalised there, as a conscientised Māori, my personal and researched evidence-based perspective actually differs to that of the hapu. I don't think I can actually represent the hapu in that space. It's more like, actually, I'm doing research in this area, and so I can only lean on my personal perspective and how, the really just focusing in on the harm that gambling, is truly an unsustainable value system that tenants a society of winners and losers. And so how can that be helpful for anybody? But there has been a strong history there for our people. And so how do I break down those barriers in my research with my research hat on, without there's a tension there, definitely.
Yeah, I can see how that's a tricky one for you. I wasn't trying to trap you up or anything, but yeah, I can see why there's a tension there. So, in an ideal world for you, I know you mentioned about 18 poker machines, but in an ideal world, would there be no poker machines? I mean, there was a time when there were no poker machines at all, right? So, is that the ideal? Is that the eventual scenario that you're looking at? Or do you think that there is a tolerable level?
Yeah, I'm a purist. So my personal, because I also submitted a personal submission in addition to on behalf of Tainui, but my personal position would be, for the removal of them. That's what casinos are there for. That's, if people want to go gamble, then that should be the place where they should go to do that. And also not encouraging for there to be casinos in every city, but there's a time and place, for that. So that's my personal opinion of it, because they suck the lives out of people, all peoples. They don't discriminate. All ages, all backgrounds. All you need is that one win, and you're hooked. And so they're very, very dangerous devices. And so our communities, wherever they're placed, it's very easy to get sucked into. The addiction of it, and it just causes so much harm for all peoples.
Oh, kia ora. Thank you. Appreciate the response.
Fantastic. Thank you, Peti. Thank you for your submission and speaking on behalf of your hapu. Today, we really appreciate your time. Thank you. All right, so we're going to move on to our next.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, just saying, I just saw Sophie pop her hand up. I were you checking on whether she needed to ask a question or not? I completely missed.
No,
Oh, she's good. Okay.
I think she was just waving goodbye.
Yeah, go to bed, Sophie. You can
So
always turn your microphone and lie down and put a blankie over yourself.
She's sent a love heart to you all, so just there you go. So we're on to our next submitter. So Kate Nayland is online for us. So welcome, Kate. Kia ora. I look forward to your presentation on your submission. You have 5 minutes.
Tēnā koutou katoa. Ko Kate Nayland tōku ingoa. Kia ora everyone. I'm Kate Nayland from Te Whatu Ora, National Public Health Service, Wellington Region. With me is Jill McKenzie, Medical Officer of Health. We would like to acknowledge mana whenua of Kapiti and Ōtaki. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. Firstly, we would like to commend the Council on their proposed gambling policy. Introducing a sinking lid with no relocations is a positive step towards reducing harm from this form of gambling within the community. This afternoon, though, I would like to talk on the smoke-free policy. In particular, a few key areas, the first being partnering with mana whenua and youth. It is already well documented in your statement of proposal the harm that tobacco smoke causes. Although smoking rates continue to drop, inequities remain. Nationally, Māori and Pacific smoking rates are more than double that of Pākehā. Consistent with disparities in smoking rates, Māori and Pacific peoples are disproportionately burdened by smoking-related illness and death. Evidence shows that tobacco is the leading driver of health inequities among Māori and Pacific populations. E-cigarettes or vapes were introduced as a cessation tool to aid those adults who wish to stop smoking. While nicotine and non-nicotine vaping may be less harmful than cigarette smoking, the long-term effects are unknown and it is appropriate to be cautious at this time. It is extremely unlikely that these products are harmless. We are now seeing a rapidly increasing trend of vapes being widely used by those who have never smoked, particularly rangatahi. Of particular concern is the high number of Māori rangatahi vaping. You'll see those stats listed in our written submission. Given the disproportionate harm Māori face from tobacco and the high uptake of youth vaping, we recommend that Council work closely with mana whenua and youth in the implementation of this smoke-free policy. In order to increase the effectiveness for those most impacted and create a supportive environment for the rollout of your smoke-free policy, it will be important to have the right community champions and groups involved to gain momentum. We acknowledge that Council has existing relationships with mana whenua. To successfully implement the new elements of the smoke-free, vape-free policy will depend on close partnerships with mana whenua, especially with regards to rolling out smoke-free, vape-free beaches, lakes and rivers. We recognise that partnering with Māori is a key step to achieving the government's smoke-free 2025 goal. Working closely with Māori in the implementation of your plan will help to lower the inequitable health outcomes that Māori suffer from tobacco products. We commend the Council on identifying a number of different actions to support smoke-free public spaces. Continued partnering with mana whenua during the implementation will lead to wider and more innovative actions, leading to environments that have greater success in lowering the smoking rates for Māori whānau. Involving youth is also key. Young people will have creative ways to implement the vape-free part of the policy. This will also help increase buy-in and to normalise vaping as a quit tool for those rangatahi who are smokers. We are aware of your youth council who could be a key group to have involved in the implementation of the policy. An example of the power of rangatahi leadership, we have had the privilege of working with rangatahi in Wainuamata who led the way for a smoke-free car policy to be introduced in their community. As you're aware, smoke-free cars are now law, and these rangatahi were key in helping to achieve that. Our second point that we'd like to cover is the main Otaki street. As noted in your statement of proposal, Otaki has the highest prevalence of smoking in the district, and parts of Otaki are the most deprived areas across the Kapiti coast. Otaki has a higher popular proportion of Māori and young people than other areas in the district. We advocate that the council lead the way nationally, exploring the implementation of the two-block Main Street of Otaki to become both smoke-free and vape-free. As an example, we note that Wellington City Council already has a number of laneways that are smoke-free, vape-free spaces and would be able to share their experience implementing these. We encourage the council to take a lead on implementing Main Street Otaki as a new initiative for Kapiti that would reduce the normalisation of smoking and vaping in public spaces. If council were to explore this initiative, then we would be happy to work with you on this. It may be possible to link the actions around a smoke-free, vape-free Main Street with the Vision Otaki long-term planning and development. Finally, we would like to talk about the approval of smoke-free, vape-free events. Your proposed policy outlines that from 2025, public events receiving council funding will be encouraged to support smoke-free, vape-free messaging. We would like to reinforce the recommendation from our written submission that greater weighting is given to the approval of smoke-free, vape-free events who are seeking use of council land or funding, and recommend that this is introduced prior to 2025. In other words, council could begin promotion that smoke-free, vape-free events will be prioritised for funding or bookings as soon as possible. Thank you for your time today and the proposals you have outlined to support an environment that normalises smoke and vape-free lives. We are happy to answer any questions you may have.
Kia ora, Kate. Thank you for that. We do have a couple of questions from the table, so I'll start by asking for one of those from Councillor Wilson.
Hi, Kate. Thanks for that. Kate, you guys have probably made a few submissions on this, so you might be familiar with the question. The introduction of smoke-free and vape-free policies, which I have to say I favour myself, but it comes to the question of policing that. So do you have any experience of where these policies have been introduced, and what was the method of policing? Because quite often it can be at best vexed, and at worst it can kind of get really crazy. So yeah, just if you've got any experience around examples of where that's happened and what the experience has been.
So I think firstly, just to clarify that because this is a policy and not a bylaw, it is not enforceable. So the policing of the policy is kind of just social reinforcement by members of the public or by businesses, kind of reminding people that this is a smoke-free, vape-free space. I think in the rollout of the policy, there would need to be kind of behavioural change campaigns that will run alongside it to, working with the residents, businesses, mana whenua in what the policy contains and how this is going to be rolled out. Jill, did you have anything that you would like to add?
No, I think that it's really about the community owning this and actually being able to model that behaviour and actually be able to just remind people that this area is designed to be smoke-free, vape-free, and that positive reinforcement can actually be quite effective. And we've seen that with smoke-free policies as they stand. You know, they started on even our own hospital grounds. We've had that where we support people to recognise and respect it as a smoke-free area. We certainly can't police it, but that is quite powerful in its own right, particularly if the community owns it.
Fantastic. Thank you. Now a question from Councillor Pravanov.
Thank you. Through the chair, thank you, Kate, for your presentation and for the submission that's been received. One of the questions that was asked was about inclusion of following of areas in the policy. I'm just interested in your thoughts on, so it says within 10 metres of public council buildings and facilities. I'm interested to know what your thoughts would be about including those council buildings, as well as your views on whether you think that KCDC should also have something in the policy that says that they will not lease any buildings, council-owned buildings, to vape shops.
So the first part of your question, should council buildings be included in the smoke-free, vape-free policy?
Correct.
Sorry?
Yes,
Yeah.
and facilities.
Yes, I agree that they definitely should be included in the policy. I think council should set the example of what they expect the rest of the community to follow. And as for the vape retailers, whether you lease council buildings to vape retailers,
was the question around whether it should be advertised that they won't be policed, setting the expectations? Did we hear that right?
So my question was around, like council leases some buildings to retailers, whether or not council should have a policy that says vape shops are excluded from being a leasee.
Yeah, I'm not sure we can comment on the legal implications of that, but I think council can have policies around what kind of premises they want to lease their buildings to, and rather than using this particular policy. I'm not aware of how you would normally decide what you would like the properties to be used for if you do have any existing policies around your lease agreements.
So I suppose in terms of public perception, would it be useful for the policy to say that KCDC wouldn't lease buildings to vape shops?
I think that'd be a great thing for council to discuss amongst yourselves and see how, if there was agreement around that. I think it's Kate said it's leading by example as well.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Now, Councillor Halliday.
Yes, hi, two questions. Kate, thank you for your presentation. I just wanted a bit of clarity on something you talked to there. You said laneways down in Wellington were smoke-free and vape-free. Can you just confirm whether that was a policy or a bylaw?
That is a policy.
Okay, so people could actually smoke down there. The other thing was, if we were to look at an approach with regards to how we can get this message out to our community with regards to the reduction of smoking, do you think a regional approach where we're all saying maybe the same message or doing a campaign would be effective?
Regional as in Greater Wellington?
Correct.
Yeah, yes, I absolutely think that some consistency across the region would be an excellent idea. We have a lot of people that travel, as you're probably aware, from Kapiti into Wellington, or Wellington into the Hutt Valley, and having some consistency would be fantastic.
Fantastic. No, thank you very much.
Great. Thank you for those questions. Thank you, Kate, for your presentation. We appreciate you taking the time to come and talk to us and answer our questions as well. I wish you all the best for the evening.
Thank you very much.
All right, team, just again, well, not again, so the submissions are on our LG Hub, so you can access those. We do have, I'll try and give you a bit of a rundown of who's coming up now, because I'm conscious some of you won't have a list of who's actually presenting. So
it's not that, that's actually not in order. So it's just having the page, just a page reference of the first one would be appreciated.
Really helpful for me too. I just had to scroll through to Whatuora. Partially, I think it is, we've had some of our presenters that have pulled out today during the day, so that is potentially why they're out of order. Our next presenter is Christy Kang from PGF Group. So Problem Gambling Foundation. I have no idea. Let me scroll and see what I can find. We'll see if we can get staff to give us some page numbers for those, if we can sort those page numbers for these submissions on our list. That'd be really good for us to reference this. Just a reminder, councillors, with your questions, if we can keep to the questions around the submission, not around some of the things that we may have to debate later. So these are questions to the submitters on their submission itself, please. If we can keep our questions focused, that'd be really helpful. All right. Christy, welcome. So you're okay with the use of this? There's a button that when it's red, it means you're live, okay? So, which is up around here. So welcome.
Awesome.
We welcome your presentation on your submission.
Awesome, thank you. Tēnā koutou katoa. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. My name is Christy Kang. I am the Policy and Public Health Manager at PGF Group, or Problem Gambling Foundation. I'm also joined here by my colleague, Anthony Laupepe, who is the Mapamaya provider, and both PGF and Mapamaya provide nationwide gambling harm minimisation services. So that includes providing both counselling and public health support across Aotearoa, New Zealand. Firstly, I would just like to counter some of the rhetoric that you might hear today at this hearing, and that is problem gambling is only an issue for 0.2% of our population in New Zealand. Problem gamblers reflect those who are experiencing severe gambling harm, so that is the very pointy end of the diagram that you can see on the slide. And focusing just on those who experience severe gambling harm really doesn't give an accurate picture of what is happening in the communities. So as you can see, gambling harm exists on a continuum. So people experience mild, moderate, and severe gambling harm. And the Ministry of Health estimates around 250,000 people, or the population of Wellington, experiencing mild, moderate, and severe gambling harm. We'd also like to say that focusing just on problem gamblers doesn't reflect the impact it has on family, friends, colleagues, employees, etc. And research estimates around 6 to 10 people are impacted by people or by someone else's harmful gambling. So Class 4 gambling is the most harmful form of gambling in Aotearoa, New Zealand, and that is why we're discussing this Class 4 gambling policy. Pokies are designed to be highly addictive, and they're specifically designed to be very absorbing, and that is not a mistake. And that is why we see almost half of all the clients seen by service providers such as ourselves citing Class 4 gambling as the primary mode of gambling harm. So what can Kapiti Coast District Council do? We strongly recommend Council to adopt a sinking lid policy. Over half of all councils in New Zealand already have a sinking lid in place, and your neighbouring Wellington City, Hutt City and Porirua City Council have a sinking lid. And Porirua City Council today went further in proposing a comprehensive sinking lid, so not allowing for club mergers and relocations. We really advocate for a sinking lid policy because it is the best policy available to councils to minimise harm in your communities. It is the best public health approach in addressing gambling harm. So it looks after those who are experiencing mild, moderate and severe gambling harm, not just problem gamblers. And we know through research that the sinking lid policy reduces problem gambling expenditure by 13%. Another debate or argument is that Class 4 gambling benefits the community by way of grants. And while this is true, we would like to encourage council to really think about where the money is coming from rather than where it is going. Evidence has repeatedly shown that Class 4 gambling transfers wealth from more deprived communities to less deprived communities. A 2020 Bell report, which is commissioned by the DIA, it reflected that communities in deciles 6 to 10 contributed 74% of the GMP, but they only received 12% of grants. So this system is inequitable and it disproportionately impacts our Māori, Pacific and most deprived communities. Laupepa, do you want to say anything?
Thank you very much. My name is Anthony the LPP from Mapumaia. We totally support the sinking lid policy that has been support with our Pacific community 8% compared to the 24% for the general population. It's a high number for a populations of the Pacific. And what we are seeing in the ground as a health promoter and also in Mapumaia we have counsellors. Some families, same family will be affected by gambling and also drug and alcohol, family violence and a whole lot goes on in these families. So what we are saying in our submissions, the sinking lid is a way forward in terms of us working together to make sure that the community are looked after and be supported as well. As mentioned in our submission, that Porirua and also Wellington City Council and Lower Hutt, they have take a step further in terms of putting some process in place, and we are keen to see that a Kapiti Coast Council can go through the same direction as well.
Thank you.
Kia ora, Christy and Anthony. Thank you for your presentation to your submission. I'll give an opportunity if there are any questions. Yes, we do. We've got Councillor Wilson.
Yeah, thanks guys. You just mentioned Porirua City Council are kind of accelerating the sinking lid policy. Did they, is that, that's operative now?
No, they're just considering it. So they just
right.
had a public consultation and today was the hearing date. But Hutt City Council has that comprehensive sinking lid in place, and that's been in place since 2021. So a sinking lid that allows for no club mergers, no relocations. Plus they've also got an ethical stance to not apply for and accept Class 4 grants.
Okay. And are you aware of any councils that have actually introduced that have that as a that's a policy?
As a comprehensive policy, yes. So that's Lower Hutt has one in place right now. Tasman and Western Bay of Plenty are the three councils that have what we call a comprehensive sinking lid.
Yep. Okay. Thanks.
Fantastic.
May I ask a question?
Sure you can, Councillor Coe.
Thank you. Look, I have done a limited, I admit, amount of reading on addiction, but one of the things that I have learned is that addiction is there no matter what, and it comes out in one form or another. So if one form of addiction is blocked off for a person with an addictive personality, they will find another way of expressing that same addiction. So I guess my question is, if we have a sinking lid on on gambling and the physical forms such as pokies and what have you, what does that addicted person then turn to? Is it online gambling that we have no control over, for example, or is it some other form of addictive behaviour? And I'd be interested if there's any research on that.
That's a really interesting question, and I guess, you know, gambling does present in many different ways, so I think it's so the clients that we see definitely have gambling, maybe addiction, other forms of addiction, and mental health as one of the coexisting problems. But I guess in terms of the concern around whether if we limit physical venues in the communities, will they go into online gambling? So that is a debate that comes a lot in lots of council hearings. Yes, when the lockdowns happened and there was no pokies open because of that COVID level 4 lockdown, yes, they went to online gambling. But what we saw once those venues reopened is the flocking back to the pokie machines. So, and actually it spiked in terms of the return in the Class 4 venues. To be frank with you, we don't have much data in New Zealand. The Ministry of Health and the DIA have not really looked into the amount of online gambling that's occurring in New Zealand. But with a potential national government coming in, we have been signalled that online gambling will become regulated. So that is a space that council could advocate in if that is a concern for the community. That is to fund their tax plan. Now, Pepe, do you have any community insights?
Yeah, with the conversation that we're having in community in terms of our church program from Palmerston North to Wellington, it seems to be coming out a lot in terms of the family that are in a low socioeconomic area. They'll be disadvantaged in terms of addiction to the gambling stuff and also the alcohol and all these other stuff that goes with it. So it seems to be connecting to other addictions that they have as well. So it's becoming quite a big issue in the space that we are operating in. So that's why we are hoping the council can adopt something so that we can start the conversation and the process as well.
So I guess the public health argument here is if you limit access, you're protecting the community. So that pokies are dangerous products, and we would like to see greater measures around limiting access in the community.
Okay, so just following on, you know, the other thing in terms of addiction is that it is actually a mental health issue. And so really you're not going to, in essence, solve the problem unless you deal with the mental health aspects. And maybe that's something else that we can advocate for, because as I say, if you block off one form of, you know, of expressing it, it pops out somewhere else, whether it's alcohol, drugs, whatever.
Exactly.
So really you've got to get to the root of the problem, which is the mental health issues that cause the addictive behaviour. So it's not a simple, it needs a multi-pronged approach. Simply taking away, you know, opportunities to gamble doesn't fix the problem.
But also pokies are quite unique in that they've been designed by psychologists who really know how to trigger that response system in people's brains. So I guess the product again itself has been designed to be quite dangerous and perpetuating that addictive behaviour.
Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you, Christy. Thank you, Anthony, for your presentation today. We wish you all the best for the rest of the evening. Thanks for taking the time to come and talk to us. Fantastic. So the next submission is page 96 in your list, and this is Jared from the Gaming Machine Association of New Zealand. Welcome, Jared. It's great to have you here. You're welcome to start whenever you would like.
Great, I'm Jared True. I represent the Gaming Machine Association of New Zealand, which represents the vast majority of gaming machine societies. We're supporting your status quo, the status quo policy in relation to the caps, which of course doesn't allow any more venues in Otaki. And we also support the status quo relocation provision. Just before I get into my formal presentation, just in relation to your earlier question about do people migrate online, of course we had the great experiment when we had COVID. We had all our venues closed. Sky City has its own online casino. In 2018, pre-COVID, it had 25,000 users, and in 2020, post-COVID, that doubled to 50,000 users. Sky City's revenue in 2018 was 250 million online. That jumped to 800 million post-COVID. So that's the ultimate. When we close all our physical venues, will people migrate online? Users doubled, spending tripled. That's outlined in paragraphs 71 and 72 of my written submission. So your current policy was developed after a very thorough public consultation process. It's working, it's reasonable, it's entirely appropriate. There's nothing that's happened over the last 3 years that would justify a sudden change in your policy. There's no new evidence or no new concern that would justify adopting a more restrictive policy. The sky's not falling. We've had gaming machines in New Zealand for 25, 30 years. The numbers are naturally reducing. We've seen that nationwide and also seen that here. In 2015, you had 14 venues. You're now down to only 11 venues. And to put that into context, after the Christchurch earthquakes, we lost 11 venues overnight. The social impact report was an excellent report. It confirmed that you have fewer gaming machines and fewer venues and fewer machines per capita than almost most other territorial authorities. You rank 43 out of 68, both in the number of gaming machines per 10,000 adults and also by way of gaming machine profits per capita. As far as venues go, you're 55 out of 68 in relation to the number of venues per 10,000 adults. So that would suggest to me that there's not an overpopulation of machines here. You've got a very modest amount of machines, no more machines in Aotaki. It does enable a modest increase in places like Waikanai. Entirely appropriate, entirely reasonable, and no need to adopt a more severe policy. Importantly, in relation to relocation, you've got a very, very sensible relocation policy at the moment that enables people to come to council on a case-by-case basis, put their case forward, and for you to consider whether there's positive factors from a potential relocation. That happens after public notification and public hearing process. Now, relocation was put in the Act by the Maori Party. It was Te Reo Whāroa's bill. It was designed as a harm minimisation tool to enable venues to move out of areas that may be undesirable, because they may be in a high deprivation area, or maybe close to residential areas, maybe close to community centres. Enables people that are in those situations to come to you, put their case forward, and if you believe that the new location is more desirable, both from a community's perspective and a harm minimisation perspective, it enables you to allow those venues to move, which is entirely positive. Why would you not want to do that on a case-by-case basis? If you simply say no to relocations, the venues just stay in the undesirable locations where they are, just entrenches them where they are. Having relocation also has another raft of benefits. It enables venues to move out of earthquake-prone buildings, enables the staff to be safer, the customers to be safer. It's a health and safety issue. We do have some venues that are on very large blocks of land. Sometimes those venues looking to move to smaller modern premises where those large blocks of land can then be used for high density affordable housing, which is absolutely positive. We do have situations where if you have a sinking lid policy and no relocation, the landlords know that in relation to our venues and they start charging above market rent and imposing unreasonable terms. If you allow the venue to relocate across the road or next door, then it takes that power away from the landlord to be unreasonable. Importantly, though, the venues that we do see relocate do go from the old sort of once Warriors type style venues into the new modern sports bar type facilities. Those new modern smaller premises attract a more affluent clientele. Totally positive for the community, totally positive in respect of harm minimisation. Having a relocation policy like you do at the moment is also just simply fair for the people that own these businesses. If there's a disaster like a fire, earthquake, or if you come along and you need their premises as a result of a public works acquisition, enables them to move to alternative premises. Entirely reasonable, entirely fair. Having the current policy also protects your extremely valuable community funding. Over $1.6 million a year in community funding comes through to the Kapiti Coast. Without the ability to relocate following a natural disaster, you could have all that funding turned off overnight. We've got 11 venues at the moment, and as I said at the beginning, we lost 11 venues overnight in Christchurch. Relocation is extremely common. 65 out of our councils currently have a relocation policy. Problem gambling rates very low, 0.22% of the population. There's no link between gaming machine numbers and problem gambling rates. Over the last 15 years, we've lost pretty much a third of our machines. However, the problem gambling rates stayed exactly the same. Welcome your questions.
Fantastic. Thanks, Jared. Appreciate that presentation. We do have at least one councillor who's wanting to ask a question. So, Councillor Wilson.
Thanks for that, Jared. The 1.6 million that's come to the Kapiti Coast via the machines, how much has been turned over in those machines to produce that?
So the total spend in the Kapiti Coast in 2020 was 10.4 million.
And what's the payout? Well, how much? So that's the total spend. So how much of that is actually paid out of the machines?
The machines return on average 91.5%. So on average, if you were to put $100 into a game machine, you would win back 91.5.
So I'm not very good at maths, but so if we forget about the 0.4 and just run with the 10 and 91% comes back, that would be 9.1 million that's come back. So
so the $10.4 million is the losses.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so 10.4 million is lost.
So the turnover through the machines would be more than that, but the turnover through a machine is a little bit artificial because I sit in front of a machine and I put a $20 note in, I win 19, I spend the 19, I win 18, I spend the 18, win 40, spend the 40, and then after an hour I go home with no money.
Yeah.
Have I spent $200 or have I spent 20?
Yeah. I guess it's relative to how much the 20 impacts on you and the family and who gets dinner that night. But the fact that the numbers of machines have come down, do you see that as a good thing or a bad thing?
I see it as a bad thing. I think the original number of machines that you had was reasonable. It was still low by national standards. It enabled us to provide more community funding.
So presumably you would then advocate to have more machines?
Well, it's a matter of striking a balance. I think your current policy strikes that balance, and it's a matter of advocating for something that's reasonable and likely to get across the line. I think a sensible policy would be retaining your current one. That's why I haven't come along and advocated for saying having an open policy.
Yeah. And just which it might help you in terms of interpreting your figures. The total spend and the total number of machines per head of population in Kapiti, it might be a little misleading. I don't know if you're aware of what the demographic makeup is, but I'm typical of the Kapiti population, so we're quite old people. And a substantial portion of us live in retirement villages where there is no poker machine. So in terms of the actual population who are out there in the community, I think the figures are a little bit skewed. So I think the numbers, if you had a look at those numbers, and then I don't think you would see Kapiti as being a really low, in that lowest decile. You've still got us down in the bottom third. But anyway,
I lived here for 6 years, and I lived in Ramarani Beach for 6 years. I worked in the Porirua District Court for 6 years, so very much know how the demographic is.
Yeah. So just
Awesome.
and my last question is, if you do you concede at all that there is a negative impact of poker machines in the more deprived communities? And the point that was raised by a previous speaker...
Can I just interrupt for a second, Councillor Wilson? We're asking questions, not debating with our
No,
presenters,
it's a question. So the question is, do you accept that there is greater harm in areas that are financially struggling anyway?
Of course we accept that there's a small percentage of people that experience harm that play the machines. That's why we invest a huge amount in minimising that. That's why we invest in things like facial recognition technology. But it's also a matter of balancing the small amount of people that suffer harm from the machines versus the enormous amount of good that comes from the machines versus from the community funding. I've been to a forum like this where we got our grant recipients to come along and talk to us about the very good things that they could do, and you hear case after case after case of this is the facility we wouldn't have been able to do if we didn't have the funding. This is the rugby team where we charge $25 for the kids. It would be $125 for the kids. These are the camps that we took these kids on. It was 12 this year. It would be 2 next year if we didn't have the funding. It just goes on and on. So it's a matter of balancing that up. And I think your current policy strikes a fair balance.
Okay, that's me. Thank you.
Great. Mayor Holborough.
Yes, just a very quick one. Thank you for your presentation today. You drew this example of the COVID shutdown and the rise in online gambling. I'm just wondering, I couldn't see it in your submission, is there analysis of who those people were? Like our seriously vulnerable people who are potentially prone to problem gambling, were they the ones who switched to online gambling, or were they a new group of people? Was there any analysis done on that?
No, there's no analysis done of that. The data that I've got is in paragraphs 71 and 72 of our submission, which is just sourced from the annual reports from Lotto. So we saw this exactly the same thing with Lotto. Closed the physical stores of Lotto, their expenditure doubled and the number of people tripled. Same with Sky City's online casino is only one of thousands of online casinos that are available, and its spend went from 250 million to 800 million. And it's just one of many, many, many options that are available. So no, there's no detailed breakdown, and of course these guys are operating offshore and unregulated, so you don't really have that data. But what we do is just have the hardcore raw facts pre-COVID, when the physical venues were available, versus close the physical venues and the online skyrockets. And the online is no grants, no taxes, no regulation, no control, no harm minimisation, unlimited prizes, ability to promote the product, entice people to come back, all of that which we don't have on the physical space.
Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you, Jared. I think that's all the questions. Appreciate your time this evening, coming to speak to us. All the best for the evening.
Kia ora, sorry, I had one quick question.
Oh, sorry, Jared.
Sorry.
Sorry, I missed you.
On Zoom, so it's a little bit hard to get stuff known. Hey, thanks, Jared, for your presentation. You talked briefly to the fact that there are some kind of interventions that are being put in place to minimise harm, such as facial recognition and the like. Sorry, excuse me, I've got a bit of a weird sickness. Just wondering what sort of evidence you have that those interventions are actually reducing the harm that's being experienced in the community.
Well, if you just take one example, which was an industry-led initiative where we spent quite a bit of money at our high turnover venues and implemented facial recognition technology to enforce and monitor exclusion orders. And when we looked at adopting that technology and putting that technology forward, there was dozens of research papers that we went through and found which confirmed categorically that exclusion was a very, very effective tool to treat and deal with problem gambling. But where it fell down was the fact that it was very, very hard over a period of 2 years to identify people accurately when they're coming into the venues. And facial recognition technology is absolutely amazing at doing that. I've seen the technology in action. I've seen it being trialled. You have someone that will come into the room when it's been demonstrated to you and you think, oh yeah, that photo was 2 years ago, I wouldn't match those two up, but the system gets them every single time. So things like that, absolutely, fundamentally they work. And it's a great deterrent as well. If you exclude yourself for 2 years from all the local venues and that you know they've got facial recognition, you're not going to go in there because you know you just can't cheat the system. It's a bit like driving past a speed camera. It's going to get you every time.
Okay. Anything else, Councillor Hanford? No, you're done. All right. Thank you, Jared. Appreciate the input. So our next presenter is Martin Cheer from Pub Charity Limited. Welcome, Martin.
Kia ora tātou. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, Your Worship. Thank you for the opportunity today. I don't envy your task. We attend these policy meetings on a regular basis, and I find the volume of information that's put in front of you and the quality of it it doesn't make your job easy. So I thought I would keep this very short and sweet and focus on one particular aspect of your deliberation. Now, if I can. And one thing that I'm not going to give you any opinions. I'm a very opinionated individual, my wife would tell me, but I'm not going to give you any opinions. Everything I'm going to put in front of you today is from those sources: Statistics New Zealand, Department of Internal Affairs, Te Whatu Ora, or Ministry of Health when it was operating when this research was done, a High Court decision from Victoria, Australia, and from problem gambling researcher Professor Christopher Irwin. I think that by focusing on the singular issue, which is what you're considering, is does a reduction in machine numbers and venues reduce the prevalence of adverse consequences associated with problem gambling? That's the essence of the policy you're considering and the decision you're making. In pursuit of that, I thought we'd look at this statistic here. Now, so these sources are from the Department of Internal Affairs and Statistics New Zealand. It creates a very simple calculation of the exposure of the per capita exposure of machines to the population in New Zealand. And you'll see that since 2004, when the Gambling Act was passed and the commencement of these type of policies, the actual per capita exposure rate is halved. And if you were looking to achieve the reduction in exposure as a policy objective, you'd have to say that's fairly successful. To reduce a demographic exposure by 50% over a span of a policy, you would consider you've achieved your objective. The question is, did that lead to a reduction in problem gambling? So here we have empirical evidence. It's not my opinion. And the Ministry of Health, Te Whatu Ora, now measures statistically the prevalence rate of problem gambling in New Zealand over a series of pieces of research. And this is a summary of their findings. I put it in the hard copy because I don't want to read it out word for word, but effectively their finding was there's been no change in the problem gambling prevalence rate in New Zealand since the late 1990s. So that the point raised by the councillor earlier about this being a mental health issue and the dynamics that drive these behaviours is it's not an environmental factor. Otherwise, we would have seen a 50% reduction produce a 50% reduction in the problem gambling prevalence rate. The fact that it hasn't changed at all over that period of time, we've been digging in the wrong hole, we've got the ladder up against the wrong tree, whatever you want to call it, but it's not working. Anybody that suggests that it has, I would question where they're getting that information from. So as a strategy, as a policy tool, if your expectation is we impose a sinking lid, we'll reduce the per capita exposure to the population in capita and we'll see a reduction in problem gambling prevalence, there's no evidence for that at all. In fact, the evidence is for the actual contrary, that there'll be no change whatsoever. The gambling addiction rate is an extremely small number of individuals, and comorbidity, the point that was raised, and the complexity around it means that a simple change in environmental factors has proven to be unaffected statistically. The actual gambling addiction rate, which is usually the concern, like a loss of control, which is evident in pathological problem gambling, that rate is between 0.1 and 0.2% of the adult population in New Zealand. You're talking about a very small number of people, and you're trying to get at them through the general population, and it's proved to be ineffective, partly because the proposal that environmental factors are the drivers of that rate of prevalence rate. It's simply not the case. Contemporary research in the United States is using genomic sequencing to identify people that are vulnerable to addictive and compulsive behaviours, and customising treatment. I believe that's the future, but as long as we're talking about numbers of machines, we're just not even going to look at the alternative. As far as the machines are addictive, a problem gambler in Melbourne sued Crown Casino and Aristocrat Technologies, claiming that gaming machines were designed to be addictive, highlighting a number of features within the machine, and claimed that her problem gambling was as a direct result of the design of the machine. And after quite a lengthy hearing, the judge concluded that none of the arguments put forward were supported by any evidence and actually threw out the case. So again, if you've got a machine that's exposed to large numbers of people and you've got an addiction rate of 0.1 or 0.2%, it's clearly not the machine. If you've got a participation rate between 10 and 12% of the population on a regular basis, and it produces an addiction rate of 0.1%, and that's for all forms of gambling, by the way, then clearly it's not the machine. It's just logically you cannot conclude, otherwise you'd have everybody that played the machine become an addict. So if they're designed to addict, let's say I'd need to get my money back because they're not very good at it. The Problem Gambling Foundation presented a claim that Professor Irwin's research indicated that sinking lids reduced problem gambling spend by 13%. Well, that's a noble objective, isn't it, right there? So you put in place a sinking lid, and in time you're going to benefit to the tune of a 13% reduction of spend by problem gamblers. The fact of the matter is he didn't say that at all. Here's his findings. First of all, the reduction in spend was over 7 years and it's inflation adjusted. And I don't mind him doing that, but the actual nominal reduction in spend was 0.97%. And he pointed out the fact that, yes, we saw a reduction over 7 years of 1% or 13%, whether you want to adjust it for inflation and per capita growth. But basically pointed out we don't know whether that came from problem gamblers or casual gamblers. So that's his findings directly. That's a quote directly from his research paper. The other thing that he found was that he didn't know whether that spend was just migrating across to other forms of gambling, and evidence is that online gambling in particular is benefiting from these policy initiatives. So the question was, is there a link between exposure and problem gambling? Is there a proven link between reducing exposure through sinking lids and less harm? The evidence says no. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Martin.
Yeah.
Very pointed presentation. I appreciate that. We've got a couple of councillors with questions. Councillor Wilson.
Yeah. Thanks for that, Martin. Yes, when you say that the machines aren't the problem, there does seem to be a bit of evidence that suggests that all of the bells and the whistles and the flashing lights have a significant impact on the person using the machine. So if the machine itself isn't the problem, do you think taking away the flashing lights and the bells and the whistles, do you think that would make a difference?
Well, that was the argument that Guy took to the High Court, that basically the rotation rate of the reels, the symbols appearing on the reels, what she described as losses disguised as wins. So the actual design of the machine was inherently the cause of her addiction. The problem is there was no actual evidence of that. I think that the problem with addiction is that the things that are found to be enjoyable by non-addicts are found to be very enjoyable by addicts, aren't they? So if a glass of wine is very enjoyable for a non-alcoholic, 10 glasses of wine is very enjoyable. It's not the wine itself, it's the actual consumption of it. And I often use the example, I've been around gaming machines now since 2005, had no exposure to them previously. I've had them in my office set up with credits on them to technicians' credits so they can be played. I regularly go into venues. I've been in most of the casinos in the Southern Hemisphere. As far as I'm aware, I have not developed any compulsion to play the machines. So what the councillor raised, I'm sorry, I don't know your name, because what you said was actually one of the most insightful pieces of commentary that I've heard from a councillor, a real insight to addictive behaviour, which is you're talking about a neurobiological disorder that to a large degree is people are born into. Now, I'd make the distinction about poor judgment, that's another matter. You solve that by education. But people that have problems with flashing lights is because they're wired up to have a problem with flashing lights. 99.8% of the population don't have a problem with flashing lights. And I guess the challenge for you as a decision-making body, and I'm sure it's one that you face every day, is there are no solutions, there are only trade-offs.
Just on that point, it would be fascinating, but the idea that somehow there's a genetic link between problem gambling really does go down the line of biological determinism, and I think that takes you to a really, really dangerous place. So I would be really cautious about that argument, because the logic of the argument takes you to a really dark place. Just the last question for me, Pub Charity is the biggest distributor of funds, I think.
That's right.
That's correct. How much does Pub Charity give out each year?
We've just finished our financial year for 2022-2023 was 42.5 million.
Okay, and the same question that I asked of Jared, how much money has been lost in order for that to be distributed? So how much money has gone into the machines?
So regulations require that to represent 40%, a minimum of 40% of the total expenditure, losses if you want to use that terminology. So
About
basically our revenue and therefore players' losses was 116.7 million gross. So we take GST off that, we pay duty, problem gambling levy, and pay outgoings, and 42.6 million was what was left.
Okay, thanks.
Fantastic. Online, yes, we've got Glenn, Councillor Cooper.
Yeah, hi. Fascinating evidence, I guess, which is quite interesting. And it's quite nice to have evidence-based and emotive subject, particularly for people who are engaged in the harm end of the discussion and dealing with problem gamblers, because it's a horrendous condition, or certainly what's the right words? Dealing with people who've got problem gambling is not nice. So it's quite nice to have some evidence to balance it out. Can you just go through again in terms of, so how many people that gamble end up being problem gamblers? Because I'm not sure if I heard that right.
So the term problem gambler is defined under the gambling, the assessment tool, the psychological assessment tool we use, captures three categories of gambler: problem gambler, moderate risk gambler, and low risk gambler. Problem gamblers are the people that are having serious adverse consequences as a result of their gambling. Low risk gamblers are not suffering any adverse consequences. So if we looked at the people that we would see as addictive, suffering from addiction, it's between 0.1 and 0.2%. The last result was 0.1. That's probably more of a rounding error. Historically, it's been about 0.2% of the adult population, and that's for all forms of gambling, including lotteries. About 10% of people seeking help is for lotteries. Around about 10 to 15% is online gambling. You've got TAB, you've got sports betting, you've got casino gambling, and then class 4 is about 47% of the total of help seeking.
Wow. Okay, that's staggering.
Thank you. I think one of the points that's relevant to those figures is that of the people that present as problem gamblers, 2/3 of them are relapsed problem gamblers. So, in other words, the likelihood of a non-problem gambler becoming a problem gambler in the next 12 months is virtually nil. What we've got is a bunch of people that are recycling through these statistics. They have a period where they are under control, and then they relapse. And again, if you're looking at a statistical response to a problem, I would be targeting the treatment strategy, because clearly, and I can tell you from first-hand experience where people I know have been referred into that system, it's inadequate. And most of the resources go into beating the drum of it. It's the environment. And in the meantime, people don't get enough help. Basically, the funding pattern is not, the funding structure is not based on outcomes. Incredibly, the 26 million a year that's spent has no targets to reduce harm. So I would be looking there. I would be looking at some environmental factors as well. I would be looking at technology. But at the moment, we tend to be having this debate, which is it's all about numbers, when statistically the evidence is that it's not.
Fantastic. Fabulous. Thank you. Insightful. That's it for me.
Thank you, Councillor Cooper. Councillor Pravanov.
Through the chair, thank you, Martin, for coming along today to speak, as well as your presentation. So this hearing is about us considering our policy. And I suppose we have a number of gaming machines throughout the district, and we have, I think it's the third in the Otaki area. And that creates problems for this district. You made the comment that there's been no change in prevalence of the current problem since 2006. I'm just wondering whether there is any stats that actually breaks down what ages, ethnicities, or demographics actually are those key areas, because that might translate into some of the stuff that we're looking at here.
Look, there is, the Ministry of Health does break it down by demographic, by age range, and I think previously there was comments about vulnerabilities in certain communities. That's actually accurate. Maori and Pacifica are more highly represented in problem gambling statistics than Europeans. Asians, to some degree, as well. One of the things about a policy is you have different demographics across your TLA, and responding to that by making it possible to actually take pressure off in those areas would be a smart thing to do. I think Jared referred to the fact is you're removing a relocation clause that would allow for machines to be relocated out of a high deprivation area into a more commercial or more affluent area, and reducing the risk profile of that demographic. That's the level of sophistication, I think, that shows some thought rather than this blunt instrument, which is proved in itself to be ineffective. I think that I don't like playing around with population risk, but I think you've got to acknowledge it and respond accordingly. So, the removing the relocation clause is actually going to slow down progress in that area. I think that's probably the biggest mistake. I mean, a sinking lid is a political measure. Not 90% of the value of a sinking lid is a political one. The perception that you've got tough, you're doing something that's productive, and I think I acknowledge that. And like I say, I wouldn't do your job for quits for that reason. But in reality, at some point, we're going to have to get serious about this, because we keep pulling the levers and nothing happens. And I think at some point, someone's got to say, we need to take a fresh look at this, because we're spending a lot of time, a lot of money, a lot of talking, and those statistics haven't moved. I mean, it's staggering that the Te Whatu Ora has a policy that has $26 million a year budget, has not one metric in it about reducing harm. It is staggering neglect on their part. But we've all seen the Ministry of Health in action, and they're a slow-moving beast, and good luck to the new government.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, Councillor Halliday, have you just got one question?
One question. That's
Thank you.
quite quick.
One question.
You know what? I might not be able to help you out with this, Martin, but so much of this comes back to community via grants. I get that. Is there actually a percentage that goes, or is there a percentage allowance that goes back to supporting a health approach at all? Is there anything legislated? I mean, there's taxation, I get that, but is there a portion of that that goes
there's
back?
A specific levy imposed on all forms of gambling that's a percentage of turnover. So basically, I think the Class 4 sector contributes, based on that percentage of help seeking, around about half, which is about 13 million a year. So the total budget's 26 million a year, spread out over intervention services, research, and public awareness campaigns.
Do you think there'd be appetite for that to be increased?
Look, I don't think anyone minds paying more if you get more bang for your buck. And at the moment, it's a whimper. It's not a bang. And cool. The other side of it is one of the people ask often, why is it only 40%? Well, the government takes 23% of the net, or 20% of the gross, and the government's actually the largest recipient of proceeds from Class 4 gambling. When you take GST and duty into account, it's a third. So $1 in every 3 that's lost or expended goes to the consolidated fund.
That's lovely. I appreciate that. Thank you.
No.
Fantastic.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Martin. Thank you for your time.
No, pleasure.
Awesome. Our next presenter is from One Foundation, and that is Kerry Bird. She's online via Zoom. Kerry, welcome. You have a chance to give a presentation towards your submission. We've got 5 minutes for that.
Kia ora tātou.
Kia ora.
Yes, just following on from just what I was briefly overheard from Martin's conversation, and the components around the sinking lid, and we support the status quo, option one. Just in terms of presentations from the problem gambling support services, in 2014 there were 7,007 presentations for problem gambling harm support, and in 2022 there was 4,652 presentations for problem gambling harm support. And there is, even though there's been reductions in continually the number of gaming machines throughout New Zealand, the instance of harm has basically flatlined. So the correlation between number of machines and the presentation of harm aren't correlated. And to Martin's point, there are other tools that could be deployed. But one point I would like to talk to is that, you know, these businesses, the small businesses, are owned by basically family members who have a lot of equity tied up in these businesses. Not only have they got the Employment Relations Act, Health and Safety Act,
We've lost you, Kerry. I'm not sure whether you're still actively there.
take a piece of the equity and rebuild somewhere else in the town. I think that's inherently unfair on those small business owners in terms of that constraint. And there needs to be consideration in terms of all of the components around managing harm, and also the ability for that business to remain with its licenses intact if something untoward should happen to it. Just to follow on from where Martin was, you know, there is deprivation against Māori, Pacifica and Asian in some aspects to higher representation. You know, we work really hard to make sure that we put together a safe gambling environment. In our submission, we've got representation of some tools that we use in terms of that. But there is technology coming that will in fact make the industry safe, and that's time on device and or spend, and that technology is currently being used offshore. And so while, you know, the government gets organised with a roadmap to introduce that technology, it would be really remiss to dismantle it in a manner where it can't be rebuilt or provisioned so that we can continue to support the various organisations which need the funding from Class 4 gambling. You know, we're pretty proud of what we do in our communities, how we protect our players, and how we also connect with our communities to make sure that they're able to undertake all the things that make communities stick together. Obviously, if there was another ready source of funds to support all of our community heroes, then obviously that would be ideal. But dismantling the industry in a vacuum, I don't think is a solution. Never has been. But making sure that we provide security around players who are engaged in gambling, as opposed removing the access to gambling, because that has not resulted in a decrease in gambling. It hasn't also resulted in an increase in gambling harm. And, you know, the presentations, information that the Department of Health uses to set the levy every 3 years, and the problem gambling severity index, which they also use, it also shows that data is flatlining. So I don't have a lot more to add to that other than those submission pieces. And I haven't gone through our submission, obviously it's in front of all the councillors, and just want to thank them for obviously putting their names forward to try and drive these communities to a better space.
Fantastic. Thank you, Kerry. Appreciate your thoughts to finish up. I think we're very conscious as we sit around this table and discuss this that there is impact on our communities as we talk about it. And so it's a very interesting debate in regards to where we go with this policy. So thank you for your input. Do we have any questions around the table? I can't see any lights on. There's Councillor Hanford online has a question for you, Kerry.
Hey, kia ora, Kerry. Thank you for your kōrero. You mentioned, obviously, if there was some sort of readily available sort of funding avenue for these community organisations or clubs, that would be the most ideal situation. Is that something that you think the industry would be up for sort of working alongside local government to better understand those other opportunities? Like, is that something that you want to actively be involved with?
So, we're based in Rotorua, and so, we've had a long history of it's like self-determination in our organisations trying to maintain their viability. A lot of clubs now can't operate on a voluntary basis. They need some admin, and so we try and support in a manner which balances up the access and equity to funding. It's really important to us to make sure that everyone gets a fair shake and access to this funding stream. And there's definitely a way that these machines can coexist in a safe environment and keep delivering the community benefits. And there is a cost, but there are no free lunches. There effectively has to be this balance between your own self-determination, working within our venues to identify signs of harm as early as we can, and then moving them through to the providers who can manage and support our whānau who are in a bad space. So, we take that responsibility really, really heavily, and we try to run industry-leading harm prevention and harm identification protocols within our business. But there are solutions which could be brought to the table, which could limit play on time and or spend across all the devices electronically, and that's just around the corner. In fact, we travelled to Adelaide to have a look at their system 4 years ago, pre-COVID. So, there's solutions out there, so we don't have to throw the baby out with the bathwater. I can just go through a number of organisations that we support in Kapiti that really benefit and lever up on the dollar we put in. I suspect they're taking $4 to $5 out on the other end. That's participation in events we have up here in Rotorua for New Zealand Māori Rugby League, Kura Kaupapa down there, just all sorts of components where we are able to rebalance the inequities that the model is delivering, but it can be made safe at a higher level.
Yeah, kia ora, thanks for that answer. So you talked about harm prevention and identification, but then what's the kind of next step in that? Like, once you feel like you've taken all the steps or implemented the technology or the various interventions to what you would say prevent the harm, then it's been identified. What happens after that once there's been harm that's identified from your perspective?
We got slightly disrupted with COVID because it was quite disruptive for hospitality across the board. But what we had been working with Problem Gambling Foundation was to be able to pick up the phone and go directly to health providers in our regions, as opposed through a call centre and a referral system. So I think the next component in terms of driving better support for people who are affected by harmful behaviours, there's comorbidity across these issues, is to be able to get them in front of harm in front of our harm providers as quickly as we can without bureaucracy in the middle. And there's technology around how we are able to get them in front of, if you want to kaupapa Māori health provider, you can go there. If it's Pacifica, if you want to have someone outside your area because of privacy, there's ways that we can limit the barriers to getting in front of harm providers. Funny thing is, sorry about that phone, I've got a little first grandchild, and on Sunday, Te Whatu Ora drives up to give him his inoculation shots on a Sunday. And that's actually meeting need where it's...
He'll come back to us.
Kerry's frozen. Are you going to...
Oh,
sorry, Kerry, you're back again. We just lost you for a second.
I was in a really good flow too.
You were just talking about the flexibility of Te Whatu Ora.
Yeah, my grandson had his vaccination shots, third lot, but the Te Whatu Ora nurses came out on a Saturday once and then on the Sunday the next time to give him his vaccinations. So, you know, they have, you know, that's really enlightening in terms of having a service fit for purpose. So my mum and dad are at home, not at work, trying to get the vaccinations done. So, you know, currently we don't have a facility for after hours call centres for people requiring harm support. There's limited weekend support. So if you need to get in front of a counsellor, I've obviously got to clock out of work or try and get there within your lunchtime. So the identification of harm is one thing, but also enabling services to be in place to support these individuals who've recognised that there's an issue and their families in terms of supporting, you know, better behaviour. So, you know, I think just taking a chair away from a machine or a machine away actually isn't getting to the nub or the heart of what that is, and it's only an identification process. You know, and if you look at the data that's been gathered over a significant number of years, this problem gambling severity index and the presentation numbers, you know, there is a moderate view you could take.
Great, thanks, Kerry. We've got one last question from Councillor Wilson.
Thanks for that, Kerry. We heard earlier about there being something of a wealth transfer, so that the money tends to come out of poorer areas, and the distribution frequently goes to those who aren't struggling quite so much. I have to say, on the face of it, your organisation seems to operate differently than that. Is that a conscious thing on your part?
You know, without sort of getting out in front of everybody, you know, we try and connect the dots with the communities. And for example, and I can just give you one instance, in Kapiti, we've funded more into Kapiti than the 40% we've actually raised in Kapiti. And because we see Kapiti as a rohe which attaches to Wellington and Horowhenua, and we have resource in those, and we look at the applications on their merit. And, you know, Wellington and its wider region is a different animal because you have a number of people travelling from Kapiti, Horowhenua, on the other side of the Rimatakas. And so, you know, some of those people who take employment in Wellington and spend their money in Wellington, some of that money we get in our Wellington gaming machines, we look at that on a rohe basis as opposed to strict Kapiti coast demarcations. We also look at it on a hapu iwi rohe basis as well. And so that's how we frame up our giving. And effectively, if it's a kaupapa worth supporting, then we'll support it.
Yep, thanks for that, Kerry. Really appreciate it.
Fantastic. Kerry, thank you for your time and your presentation and submission to our policy review. So thank you. Kia ora. I'd like to invite Catherine. Come on up. Bit of a change of focus now from gambling to smoke-free, vape-free. So welcome. Love you to present on your submission. Thank you.
Tēnei te mihi ki a koe, Mr. Chair. tēnei te mihi ki a koutou, nā councillors, e oku mihi ki te panaunga o Aotearoa tō Raukawa. Oh, my own. Aroha mai, hopefully they're not seeing me.
Kia ora.
First, I apologise that I've left my papers on my desk at work, which is in Seaview, but that's okay because I live in Horewhenua, who's just but I'm okay because you've got my submission, my written submission.
Yes.
I'll take it as a given that it is read. I want to raise a couple of things. 2001, Te Wānanga Raukawa designed a tikanga-based, and it's not a policy, it's a tikanga around ohaki, around tupeka kore smoke-free. What they did is there was a queer that had foresight. She was passing from cancer, from smoking-related illness. And as a result of that, she determined that she did not want that legacy to be left for the rest of her people, and asked that a tikanga be developed for Otaki, particularly around Te Wānanga Raukawa, that says auahi kore is not a normal behaviour, way of life for Te Wānanga Raukawa. The Wānanga accepted that, adopted in its full entirety, and has since also embraced vape-free. They took leadership from the get-go based on a vision that this queer had. I would say that in 2008 was the last time your council had a policy. That's 13 years ago. And I don't say that out of disrespect, because actually it became an opportunity when we met each other at the local government conference and had a conversation. Had a conversation on what can we do to pick up that leadership that actually exists in this rohe. It exists in many forms, and that today I sent through, and it was an oversight on my part. I hadn't realised I had an appendix, the Ngāti Tō's position that we had given to Wellington City Council. I've gone from Upper Hutt to Lower Hutt to Wellington City Council, right across the region, and I do this as the regional stop smoking service that provides a service and serves your community. I do this because I have 13 years of history in this space, previously in public health, now in cessation provision. But I do this because I'm a grandmother. I'm a grandmother who has mokopuna, who doesn't want to go 5 paddocks down the road from where I grew up and see any more of my people lying in a urupa from the impact that tobacco and tobacco industry products have had on our people. You will have seen the remit for council to take leadership now is clear in your purpose of your act, particularly around C&D in terms of the purpose. It spells it out quite clearly. In the principles of the act, it talks very clearly about future-proofing your citizens and ratepayers, providing an environment that not just looks at today, but into the future. So in my submission, I clearly support both Art's position in terms of where they're sitting and what their vision is as a wider hapua-niwi. They have asked and they required their council, who serves in their area as dual kaitiaki, to provide a place of wellbeing and safety for their people and all those who sit on their land. So what does that mean? I'm also talking to you about, and I heard earlier on, Councillor, you talking about policing. It's not about policing a policy. This is about how, first of all, there is multi-layered steps that you need to take. As a council, should you, and I'm going to say hopefully you will do, take leadership in this area. It's about how you communicate it to your public, much in the same way you do with other policies that mean something to your community, that have great value. And that means you've got a comms plan that goes out before it hits the public. You have signage as an indication of what you intend to do in your community. It doesn't tell you stop. It just said this is our intention for the environment. But I go a bit further, as you'll note in my submission, that you have, as one of your councillors pointed rightfully so, you have buildings that you own and you lease. You have a duty of care to ensure that whatever property council are good kaitiaki of, do not sell products that will create harm. And tobacco and vape products create harm. So I'm going to ask you to, when you have a look at your leaseholds, when you have a look at your arrangements that look at outdoor dining, whether there are levers in there that can contractually bind people to not provide an environment of harm. Do not normalise a product that should never have come into our communities and is now creating harm. I'm not going to talk to you about whether people should or shouldn't vape, because actually that's not your remit. What your remit is to provide an environment of safety and well-being. I am going to say to you that my husband works for your council, and I'm going to reiterate it again, you've heard it many times from me. You don't just have a duty of care to your citizens and ratepayers and your residents. You have a duty of care to your employees. I dropped my husband off at the Fight Field site often, and every time I go there, there's smoking on the steps. There's a shelter that sits there that's a designated smoking area for your staff. That's not okay. That is not okay, because my husband doesn't smoke, and I'm not here for my husband, but every person like him that doesn't smoke, and he shouldn't be exposed to secondhand smoke or vape products. And this is what we're asking you to take leadership in our community as well. They shouldn't be exposed in the environments which you control to tobacco and vaping products. I'll leave it there. You've got everything else I think I've put.
Kia ora, Catherine. Thank you for that impassioned presentation. Any questions from councillors? No? There's no lights on? Oh, there is. You've got to be faster, Councillor Wilson. We're already running behind time. I'm going to shut it down quick.
Yeah. Thank you, Catherine. Really appreciate that. In terms of where other councils are standing on this, I think Poira is a little more advanced. So, what's the experience been back from other councils that you've spoken to?
Well, just so you know, I returned home 7 years ago. So I was Auckland City. I was actually the old Legacy Council, Manukau City Council, and I was responsible, for the design of the events policies, both all the smoke-free environments for stadiums. Councils have been taking a bit of a piecemeal approach. And we have just recently, I heard you ask Kate from Public Health around, is there value in the region getting together and looking at the policies as a whole? We just brought together a number of your policy planners 2 weeks ago, asking that there be some consistency across the region, recognising that it is a transport hub, and that we need to treat it that way, that people don't see that there is a clear border. Their behaviour isn't different when they move from region to region. And so, yes, Upper Hutt has they were the first council in the country to go smoke-free. So I've been talking to Councillor Wayne
Guppy
about in his council about what they could do even differently. We've been talking with Healthy Families about green zones, which is actually talks about how smoke-free, vape-free, actually addiction-free, alcohol, about how you create healthy spaces and doing it in such a way that's actually strengths-based. We're talking to Lower Hutt. You'll see all our signs all up there about what they can do differently. But what we realise is we're actually talking to council to council to council. And as I said, I'm it for our service. So I'm the comms person. I'm the person who does the relationship manager. We don't have that sort of funding. You know, you're going to go to your comms people and they'll design you a comms plan. I am the comms plan. So when the ask comes in, what we have asked your policy planners across the region to let's sit down. We'll start to connect in a more meaningful way so that we're going to do some collective planning.
Thank you.
Great. Councillor Halliday.
Hey.
Hey.
That's it, thanks. No,
Great.
Catherine, thanks for pigeonholing me at the LGNZ conference. Hopefully I've delivered. And that's thanks to people like Chris and others that are around the place as well that have empowered this, but we're going to get this through. I'll be in contact with you shortly, just rebuild the relationship and look at how we can assist more, how we can bring some of these concepts in as well.
I have to say it was lucky I'm a Facebook user because I wouldn't have known that this there was a submission going. I was never notified. Yeah.
We'll note that. Thank you. You have presented to us before in one of our council meetings, so I'm surprised that there wasn't notification that went out to you in regards to that. So that will be noted. Thank you, Catherine, for your time and your presentation. Appreciate it. Ka kite. Mandy.
Kia ora.
Kia ora.
Before we begin, can I request that we take a couple of photos? Is that okay? I understand we're being live streamed and it's a public forum. That's okay.
It's fine.
Okay. Thank you. Oh, kia ora.
That's a bit private there, isn't it? Councillor Halliday?
Kia ora, I'm Mandy, as you know, from the Cancer Society. Greetings to you, Chair, councillors and council staff. Today I've brought with me Heidi from Mana College, one of our rangatahi supporters.
Kia ora, Mandy, welcome.
Kia ora, thank you. We're very excited that KCDC is considering the inclusion of vaping in the smoke-free outdoor public places policy. The current rates of vaping among rangatahi are rapidly rising. We all know that vaping devices were originally promoted for smoking cessation. However, our rangatahi are using them for recreational purposes and becoming highly addicted. Having a strengthened smoke-free and vape-free policy is one way we can support people to quit. We commend KCDC for including a wide variety of outdoor areas as part of the consultation. We support the inclusion of all the outdoor areas listed as smoke-free, vape-free, and we respectfully request that the following additional areas be added for consideration: town centres, public toilets, council-owned or managed public car parks, and outdoor dining on council-controlled land and council-led events. And we realise that both of those are proposed from 2025. You may be aware that our National Smoke-Free and Regulated Products and Environment Amended Bill doesn't cover smoke-free outdoor spaces. These are the areas where our communities work, live and play. Soon there will be a reduction in the concentration of tobacco outlets. Currently nothing will change regarding the increasing concentration of specialist vape retailers. The Cancer Society requests, as also mentioned by Catherine, that KCDC is proactive and declines certain tenants for two reasons. KCDC is committed to developing a health strategy for our community. As a landlord, we recommend no KCDC-owned properties are leased to businesses that sell harmful, cancer-causing commodities and vaping products. We recommend avoiding or terminating lease agreements with businesses such as specialist vape retailers, tobacconists, and liquor stores. We also request that KCDC doesn't enter into lease agreements with the poverty predators, such as fast food, junk food outlets, or places where Class 4 pokies operate. Local councils now play a greater role in community wellbeing and equity. Their commitment to Te Tiriti o Waitangi has been strengthened through the Local Government Community Wellbeing Amendment Act in 2019. The domain of social wellbeing includes health, and a community awash with harmful commodities such as vapes, tobacco, alcohol, junk food and pokies, where KCDC is the landlord, does not align with obligations around social wellbeing. Also, if we're serious about following the vision laid out by our mana whenua from Hei Whakakitanga Mō Te Rohi as strong, effective kaitiaki over the environment and general wellbeing of our community, then we need to take further steps to protect our people and our environment. We need to ensure that all waterways in our rohe are healthy and free of vape and cigarette waste. As per their vision, the rangatahi of Kapiti need to be supported to reach their full potential. Extending smoke-free and vape-free policy will support this vision, and both whānau and communities will be further protected from the effects of second-hand smoke and future vaping effects. New Zealand-based evidence says seeing others smoking around you increases smoking and demotivates quitting attempts. Strong international evidence also proves that hospitality areas which are smoke-free prevent relapses and increase quit attempts. The extension of our smoke-free areas can contribute to the denormalisation of smoking and vaping, and these can prevent children and young people, our rangatahi, from viewing smoking and vaping as desirable or aspirational. The denormalising process of smoking and vaping can protect future generations from a lifetime of addiction. And as we know, young people exposed to smoking behaviours are more likely to start smoking, and it can make it difficult for those out there trying to quit. Vaping is highly visible in our rohe. You only need to go past any given bus stop on any given I don't know if you'd quite call it bribery. It's occurred to me that many of you may not have seen the kind of vapes that our rangatahi, our young people, are actually getting their hands on. And the point we're trying to make is it's often people that are known to our rangatahi that are actually buying or handing them these vapes. Notice how cute they look. They're like little highlighter pens. They're fruity, they're fun, and they're $8 to $10. These are the cheap ones. Each of these contain the nicotine of 15 to 30 cigarettes. Now, one thing I found in someone very near to me and dear to me's bedroom was this disposable vape. This contains the nicotine of 350 cigarettes. Yeah, and it's a disposable. Yeah. So our point is the less people see of these, the more smoke-free and vape-free areas there are, the less likely this is going to be seen as normal and everyday activity.
How much did you say nicotine is in one of these?
They are estimated to be 15 to 35 cigarettes, yeah. 15 to 30 cigarettes, yeah. And they are the ones I found at Vape Vend, which is where I went to purchase these items, retail for the small disposables that are the top nicotine concentration legally in New Zealand. They're all 50 milligrams per mil vapes, and they retail between $8 and $10. Sometimes they're on special for 2 for 1. So 2 for $10, just to clarify.
Wowzers. Okay. You do realise we now have a problem with these, eh?
With regards to disposing of them?
No.
Declaring as a gift.
We have to declare them on our gift register.
Okay.
Which
I think items under $50.
That's all right. We're okay. I was just making a joke, really. Thanks,
I take it you guys have a limit, right? It's under $50, so yeah.
That's right.
We're okay.
Yeah.
I was just making a little bit of a joke. It'd be quite interesting, wouldn't it? Where did you receive it from? The Cancer Society. Yeah. Anyway.
Well, we wanted to make a statement today. There's a lot of quite dry literature around.
Yeah. I appreciate that very much. We've got one question so far. Councillor Wilson.
Thanks, Mandy and Heidi. Heidi, congratulations for going to the best school in New Zealand, Akona Te Mahi Pai. Good stuff. What's your... so the question's for Heidi, actually.
Okay.
Given that this thing is called watermelon and it actually smells like watermelon, I have to say. So the kids at school, are they using these sort of flavoury type vapes?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
You wouldn't buy it if it didn't have a smell or a scent.
No.
They definitely talk about which one's better. So raspberry's more popular, I'd say, or blueberry. But yeah, you don't buy them if they don't have a flavour. There's no point really.
Right. And given that there wouldn't be many at Mana who are of legal age to smoke these, but so how prevalent is the usage?
Well, I've personally never vaped, but you might not find that a shock. If I were to tell someone at school that I've never vaped, they wouldn't believe me.
Yeah.
I think maybe less than 10 people in my year group would have never touched a vape.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so,
even smaller
this begs the next question. I'm not asking you to shop anybody, but so how easy is it for college-age kids to go in and buy them, or is somebody going in and buying them on behalf of?
I wouldn't say it's easy to buy it, but it's very easy to get your hands on one. Even going to the toilet, if I walk in, I could ask whoever's in the toilet. They would pull it out. They'll let me have some.
Yeah.
It's not very hard.
Okay. Thank you. Well done.
I would support that evidence from what we know is happening within our local colleges here locally. That's not just a Mana College issue. That is I would suggest a nationwide issue around these and the ease of access. Doesn't matter what age you say. Councillor Halliday.
Yeah, look, I've got two things. First of all, this is about the best presentation I've seen for a while. That's been very, very, very impactful with regards to that. You can say a picture paints 1,000 words and that sort of thing. I had no idea. I mean, I knew they were bad, but I had no idea about the amount of nicotine in these things. And that is
particularly disposables. You can, just to clarify, you can get non-nicotine vapes, but they are rare. Locally, they're not a hot ticket. They're not really sold. It's the high nicotine vapes. The majority of nicotine of vapes in the shop I visited were the 50 milligrams per mil.
And could I ask you, Heidi, in regards to the people that you know, are they aware? Are they actually aware of the nicotine content? Are they aware of the problems associated with nicotine, or even trying out and sort of get it, that it's essentially the nicotine that's drawing them to these once they've started?
I would say no, mostly because you don't really look at it before you take it. It's more just everyone's kind of doing it. It's normal.
And this is fairly subjective, but do you think if education programs in school would be helpful with regards to making people aware of what is in these and how harmful it can be?
Yeah, definitely.
And is there anything like that in there at the moment?
I did a health class 2 years ago, maybe
But
one
there's
health
nothing
class.
sort of on the walls or in the bathrooms or anything along that sort of line?
No. Oh, once we had a student team do it, but it lasted maybe 2 weeks. Nothing from an adult has been put around the school.
Thank you very much. Really appreciate your answers.
No, hold up. Councillor Pravanov.
Yeah, thank you, through the chair. So I have a question well, first of all, thank you very much for your presentation and for Catherine and for everyone else who's spoken today. It's been really interesting. This here, it's actually really interesting. So it's sitting here, you can actually smell it. And so, it's actually quite, it wants you to,
I've never had one either, Bob.
No, I never have had one of these, but it's actually quite inviting. And so I suppose my question is, that
You should try the
mentality
peach one. It's not as inviting. Sorry.
I've got some mint ones.
So it may be the same for young people as well, but is there any discussion amongst your peers about, needing to have, basically being addicted to these, or needing to have a fix, or or that doesn't seem to be a concern to young people?
It's not so. It's like more the. I know people like to once they've started. It's an addiction thing. Like people in class will be like, "Oh no, I need to go out. I need to have a bathroom break."
Right.
It's not so much talked about before they've started, but definitely after the addiction side.
And so the teachers, they just let that happen, do they?
It's hard for a teacher to focus on 23 students when probably 20 of them are all thinking the same thing. I mean, you can't really stop majority of the class from all wanting to do it. And it's easy to ask to go to the bathroom and you can't stop a student from doing that.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you.
Question for you, Mandy. So there are 10 specialist vape stores in Kapiti.
That's
right?
correct. Yep.
So from a council point of view, be very difficult for any council, I think, just to go and close them down. And again, you guys will have dealt with this. I know there's an example of a vape store in Porirua, which it was a dairy directly opposite a school, and they basically said, "Oh, we're not making enough money as a dairy," and they had vape, and now it's a vape store opposite school, and it was actually able to be there, continued trading, which is horrendous. But so given that you've obviously done a bit of thinking in this space, what do you think how can councils deal with what's existing there? We're talking about the poker machines with the sinking lid policy. Are councils doing that? Are you aware of anybody who's actually actioning in this space?
I'm not aware of anyone doing that, but we would fully support and fully endorse a sinking lid approach to vape shops. I know that there'll probably be a whole lot more opening up after the changes in tobacco provision next year. What they're anticipating to happen is Kapiti currently has 38 places where you can buy tobacco. They're estimating it'll go down to about 4 retailers. And we're anticipating that there will be a mushrooming of specialist vape retailers. I'm happy to be proved wrong, but that's probably what is going to happen. As for capping the numbers or minimising the number of specialist vape retailers, I'm not sure what can be done about that. We mentioned in our submission, just start with your own. If you're leasing any buildings, then don't lease them to the poverty predators.
Right.
I note you talked about the dairy that is opposite the school. The dairy that is very close to Paraparaumu School, anecdotally we're hearing in the community they have no end of bother with the vape shop. All you need to do is stick up a plywood wall and suddenly you're a specialist vape retailer. As has also happened recently in Waikanai, where the children congregate for the college bus. We have a specialist vape retailer there.
Yeah, I mean, the dairy down on Timuana Road is actually, if you look at the signage, the bulk of the signage is actually
It's
vape.
the e-vape, yes.
It's the e-vape, right, yeah.
I'll be brief, and I noticed Sophie's got her hand up as well. Are you hearing anything from a politician perspective in central government around anything coming out around putting some handles on this? Getting a handle on this?
We're not yet, and obviously we've just had a massive change recently, so we're all, in public health, we're all kind of waiting to see how it unfolds and what it will look like. We would love more regulation. Obviously the disposable vapes, they're not going to be as easy to get hold of soon. I'd love it if they all disappeared, but it's not up to me. In terms of what we're hearing out of government yet, nothing as yet. It's too early to say whether legislation will be repealed or added to or...
Cool, lovely, thank you. Bit disappointing, isn't it? But
yeah.
Fantastic. Councillor Hanford, online.
Yeah, kia ora. Thank you to you both. This is probably more a question for Heidi, if it's okay. So just in terms of the inclusion of vape-free zones into this policy, obviously that's not something that kind of is super enforceable, but are there things other than education by way of signage and the like that you think kind of council could do to make our public places sort of more engaging for young people, that would then hopefully mean they're not looking to their vape as sort of like a social connector or something to do socially. But are there other things that you think would kind of help to make our public spaces a bit more less likely to see young people vaping in?
Probably the packaging and the smell of it. It's not kind of just to look cool, but it's kind of exciting. Like, it looks cool, it looks fun. Like, there's nothing putting you off it. Like, the smell is really nice. Everything about it looks really nice. So maybe if they stop making it look so inviting to try, it would probably help a little bit more as well.
Yeah, for sure. And do you reckon council, maybe Mandy, this might be a question for you, do you reckon council has a role in sort of advocacy on that front as well to central government and other players in this space?
Well, I would suggest that if KCDC is committed to their health strategy and community wellbeing, then absolutely. Even things like tinting the windows, or there must be something we can do in terms of a council to, with the specialist vape retailers, to make them less attractive and make them less public. I mean, let's be honest, they look fun places. They look like arcades. The one I went into had a spin the wheel, and you could double your money. You could get a prize of another vape. You could get a soft drink. They deliberately have a carnival look to them, and I think if there's any way that councils could make them look less attractive, then that would be great. In terms of places where you can vape, just to me, if we can extend these smoke-free, vape-free areas and just have it less obvious in the community, anything we can do around that is really where the Cancer Society would position themselves.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
Fantastic.
Sorry,
Councillor Provano.
Yeah, so sorry, I know you want to go. So one of the things that you mentioned was, about students and bus stops. I assume that students do vape at bus stops, and if it is the case, that they come under, is it actually GW or us? Is there, is that something that we could do in that space, either signage or something?
Go back to Catherine's point really about we travel across the entire Wellington region. If we could have that joined up thinking that all councils, whether it's Greater Wellington or Hutt Valley or whoever, if all your public transport hubs are smoke free and vape free and advertised as such, then at least people know what the rules are.
Yeah. Thank you.
Great. All right. Thank you for your time this evening and your presentation, and for the gifts. I'm not sure quite what I'm going to do with this now.
Well, if you don't want to keep it, we can take it back and use it for further shock value at another presentation. It's up to you.
I'm happy to give it back to you. Thank you. I will give it to you because I'm not sure I want the smell of peach through my car. That's
okay,
all.
fair enough.
It's not a smell I'm very appreciating. So I appreciate your time. Thank you, Heidi. Thank you, Mandy.
Thank you.
Catherine, and thank you, staff, for your support as well and sticking around, and councillors for your time this evening. Ka kite, and have a great evening, everyone.